Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I'm co-founder and managing partner of Financing Solutions. Financing Solutions is a leading provider of lines of credit to small businesses. Our line of credit program is fast, easy, inexpensive, and costs nothing to set up, making it a great cash backup plan for your business. If you'd like to learn more about our line of credit program, please visit us at fscreditline.com. That's FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Or give us a call at 862-207-4118. Just remember, and I can tell you from personal experience in the businesses that I've had, the time to set up a line of credit is when you don't need it. So that when you do need it, it's there and it's ready to go. And because of our line of credit doesn't cost anything to set up. It just makes complete sense for a business owner to have it as a backup plan. Again, just visit fscreditline.com if you'd like to learn more. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with author and serial entrepreneur John Meese. John is the author of the #1 bestseller, Survive and Thrive: How to Build a Profitable Business and in Any Economy, including this one. And an entrepreneur himself, John is on a mission to eradicate generational poverty by helping entrepreneurs create thriving businesses. He is the CEO of Cowork, co-founder of Notable, and host of the Thrive School podcast. John, welcome to today's Entrepreneur MBA podcast.
Stephen, thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
You know, I get excited whenever I talk about profitability.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of like the most important thing in any business owner's vocabulary. Today's topic about how to build a profitable business in any economy, including this one, which is really, is the title of your best-selling book that you have as well. It is something that is kind of near and dear to my heart. So, I think just to start off, since you're experienced business owner, I am too, The thing that you see the most in entrepreneurs when they're starting out the first couple of years is they focus so much on sales.
Mm-hmm.
I want to grow my sales. So then, John, being experienced that you are, what happens after you start to grow your sales?
Well, I think it's worth saying that you do need to grow your sales, right? I mean, without them, you don't have a business.
Yes.
But that's just what happens pretty quickly. What I've seen so many times with either businesses that I've worked on, or that have been clients of mine, is that the sales, once they start to pick up, you sort of end up on this. We often refer to this as the hamster wheel. That you end up on this. You're running to chase the next sale. You get the sale, and whatever you did to get the sale may have cost you so much money that you're on to the next sale. And so it ends up being this sort of like exhausting pattern where you're just trying to just keep selling constantly to keep your business going. But you're, running in this hamster wheel and not going anywhere. And so, I was just last week talking to a friend of mine that's an entrepreneur, and last year he grew his business from $300,000 a year in revenue to $700,000 a year in revenue, but with zero profit.
Yeah.
And that's just the heartbreak of that is not just the numbers, right? I mean, not just the fact that that's unfortunately a very inefficient setup for a business. It's the fact that meant that he was working insane hours, barely saw his family. And it's all this sacrifice for this reward that didn't show up. Now, thankfully, him and I were talking about how we could then look at what he built and pretty quickly move a couple levers to get the rewards for himself and his family. But that's what I'm all about. I'm all about creating thriving businesses, right? That fuel your life rather than the other way around.
Yeah, I think that the times too when you see that people have focused so much on sales is they get the SHIT moment when they ran out of cash.
Yes.
Because they drove sales. Now, like in a B2B environment, it's even worse because you're carrying receivables.
Mm-hmm.
Your receivables are out there. You drove sales and you are like, I can't make payroll because, my expenses went up, my sales went up. I hope I get that profit, but, so that's like the crap moment is when you start to realize, and I do think it's a rite of passage for everybody to kind of go through that moment where they're like, they were so fixated on growing sales that they kind of forgot about profit. So
Yeah, you have to do a little bit of that to learn the lesson. But
yeah.
but if I can just address what you just said, I think that you just hit the nail on the head, which is that so many businesses they don't realize they've got this addiction to cash flow or to sales until it's too late or until there's something desperate. And so that's actually, true story. That's why I wrote this book was a little over a year ago now. We had this, maybe you've heard of it, this thing called the COVID-19, this pandemic and this lockdown. And as part of that, all of a sudden you saw so many businesses that were addicted to cash flow that had it cut off. And more than 100,000 businesses in the US permanently closed last year and will not be back. And that's a tragedy, right? So that's why I wrote this book, was to say, I wish I could go back in time and change things. I can't. But moving forward, let's build healthier businesses. Let's build thriving businesses that can sustain any economy. But just to put some data on that, I just peeked in my book to look at the data at the very beginning of last year. During the first month and a half of the Great Lockdown and the economic crisis there, 90% of businesses immediately reported a moderate or large negative impact to their business, which is not surprising. 35% of those business owners reported they had missed a recent payment on a bill or loan. So in other words, 35%, more than a third of businesses just a month and a half into the lockdown were missing bills, were not paying their bills. And by the end of June, 32% of small business owners reported they had less than 1 month of cash available to continue operations. And another 11% simply said they didn't know, right? If they were going to last another day or another week. So that's the reality of, that's why we have over 100,000 businesses that permanently closed last year, is because they didn't have breathing room to be able to adapt. And so that's why I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs build businesses that are built to thrive in any economy. So you can adapt. You can't predict what's going to happen, but you need to be able to have some wiggle room so that you can tack. I think pivot was the word of last year, but I prefer tacking, but so that you can do a little bit of tacking when you need to.
So what do you think when I know you work as a business coach and you wrote this book, you're an entrepreneur yourself, is when it's great because you have a lot of experience in your belt of looking at businesses. When you see a business that's really well run, what do you think the commonalities are? Let's change that word run that is very profitable. Because
Yes, sure. Well, we could totally get into the mechanics of the business, right? And some of that depends on industry by industry. But if we just go 30,000 foot level and look at a business and what is it, the ones that do the best are the ones that get clear on what I call your purpose statement, which is I help real people solve a real problem with a real solution. At its core, that's what business is, right? You're creating a real solution to a real problem for real people. Now, when you're unclear about who your real people are, or what problem you're trying to solve, or what your solution is, when you're unclear about things, you end up having basically, multiple businesses under the same business name. Like your business might have one name, but you're actually running 3 or 4 different problem-solving operations, and none of them really get that momentum to be able to go to the next level and really be profitable, get economies of scale. Some people refer to that as niching, and that's the same concept, right? You need to niche down. But I like to just take all that away and say, just forget that for a second. Who are the real people that your business is designed to help? What's the real problem they have that they're actively engaged in finding a solution to? And then what's your real solution to that? The reality is, if you can get clear on those 3 things, almost everything else takes care of itself. Because all of a sudden you start to get clear on these real people and you start to think through, okay, what problems they have? How can I solve that? How can I build products around that? And the rest of the business plan writes itself.
I agree, John. It just seems like having heard you say that, it seems like the businesses that are doing really, really well, they know all these integral parts of their business really well. They know why a customer buys from them.
Mm-hmm.
They know the buying signals. They know the profit margins of each client. They know which leads are generating the best results. They know their cost of acquisition. They know their profit per acquisition. It's like, and I can go on and on and on.
Sure.
Listen, we could always know more about our business, right? But the people that seems to really know what they're doing and really profitable are the ones that seem to know their business, their customers, and their employees inside and out.
Yeah, I remember the first time. So Ray Edwards is a friend and mentor of mine. I remember the first time I was at one of his. He's an author and a master copywriter. I was at one of his events, and he's told everyone, "Close your eyes, and I want you to spend a few minutes to walk through a day in the life of your customer." And then the question he asked was, where do you fit? It wasn't saying, how do you get them to find you? It was, close your eyes. Can you imagine such a real version? Can you really just lean into your empathy, what I call your empathy advantage? And really just say, can you get to know your customer so well that you can close your eyes, you can walk through a day in their life, and you can find that window in their life where your product fits and where it makes their life better. If you could do that, that means that you understand your customer really well. And that means you understand how your product relates to them really well. And so, yes, you do need to figure out things like what's your growth model, what's your cost of acquisition per customer, what's your product suite, all that kind of stuff. But it all has to stem from that purpose statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're right. You hit the nail right on the head. That starting off and really understanding your customer goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly.
So the main theme of your book, what do you think the reoccurring theme throughout the book is? Is it that?
I think it's two things. So, I mean, one is that concept is really, I hit on that a lot, which is that your business is helping real people solve real problems with your real solution. I then go deeper with that and say, okay, then once you get clear on that, you do have to get clear on, okay, what's your growth model? There's really only 5 ways to grow a business. So what's your growth model? And then from there, what's your sample solution? So, what's the way you're going to really kind of, you can think of this as a lead magnet or a free sample, but what's the way you're going to give people a sample version of your transformation? And then your product suite, what's your core products? But I would say that the second really underlying, like those are the tactical things, but the underlying philosophy behind what I write is like, it's survive and thrive, right? You need to survive, like to be able to get through whatever the moment is for your business to beat the odds. Because even outside of a crisis, the vast majority of businesses fail within 5 years. So to beat the odds, you need to survive first, but thrive is really what we're after. And thrive is I love that word because it captures profitability in business, right? For you to have a thriving business, it has to be profitable, but it also has to be sustainable and enjoyable, right? You have to actually enjoy the work you're doing for you to do it for a long time. And it has to be sustainable in the way that you have healthy relationships with the world around you, so that you're not draining, your staff or your partners or that's all that. Now, I don't get it in this book. I don't get a lot into like HR and things like that, but it's really the focus are sales and marketing and finance. But the objective we're after is to have a thriving business, much like you would have a thriving organism.
Yeah, I like that word too, because when you said it, to me, it brings up the vision of everything's working really, really well,
Exactly.
right? It's thriving, like if you're not making profit, it's not going so well,
Right.
something's wrong, so it's such a great indicator. What in life can be that's what makes business so much fun, I think, is that it's so obvious when you are successful. It's because when you're thriving, right?
Yeah. Well, and if I could say, just to counterbalance thriving for a second, there's a big cultural movement, and I think we're on the tail end of this, but of the hustle, right? And I'm not a hustler. I'm not a big fan of kind of hustling to build your business because I'm also a dad. I've got 3 kids. I'm married to the love of my life, who is my best friend. Actually, she's been my best friend since I was 13. So, business is a means to an end, right? It's a means to fuel your life. And by that, I mean more than just money, although money is a big part of that, but also your lifestyle. I mean, the flexibility that allows you to, end work early or stop in the middle of the day to go to your son's preschool graduation, or, take Tuesday nights, I, take my son Lucas out and we could go to this run club and, hang out with a bunch, just lifestyle. I think the term lifestyle business is sometimes used as a pejorative term to kind of describe small businesses, but truly every business is a lifestyle business in the sense that you're choosing what lifestyle you're going to live. And I don't know if there's just a magic number of hours per week that you should have in your business. I don't have that clarity. But I do think that you need a business that fuels your life. And that's something I'm really passionate about.
Yeah. Cool. Now, what do you think? I mean, I know you're a big reader. I know you read a lot of books. What do you think is different in your book than there are in other books?
Okay. I'm happy to answer that. No one's asked me that question before. So I think the first thing I would say is that this is not unique to my book, but this is sort of a category. I think most business books fit into one of two categories, either big idea books or they're how-to books. And I think mine is 80% how-to book. There's some big ideas in there, but the main focus is the how-to book. And that's just part of me, is I'm very tactical, and I like the 1, 2, 3 steps. That's kind of just what I enjoy. So I enjoy reading a lot of the big idea books, like Start With Why or This Is Marketing or things like that. But they're really just big idea books. After you get past the idea, there's not a little, it's up to you to figure out the tactical application.
Yeah.
So I'd say the first thing about this book is that it is very tactical. It's very, very how to. I've got a companion course that goes along with it called Built to Thrive, and a playbook and assessment. We've got the Thrive Score assessment, so you can grade your business based on how well you're doing according to these principles. So it's very how to that way. But I also have the background where, anybody who's watching video would see this. Of course, in the podcast, you can't. But I'm wearing very nerdy glasses. And I say this to say that these are literally modeled after John Nash, the Nobel Prize winning economist. These were modeled after his pair of glasses. So very nerdy. I have a degree in economics. And so before I became an entrepreneur, I was a traditionally trained economist. So what that means is that going into this book, I wanted to focus on practical entrepreneurial how-to, but also pull the curtain back on some of the major economic shifts that are happening all over our world that we're only just beginning to feel the impacts of. And so I have no less than 116 citations in my book, which apparently for my editor, that was a lot for a business book. But I did the research. So you don't have to, right? I distilled those down to the core few economic changes that you need to understand to stay relevant in the changing economy.
Yeah, what's interesting too is I know a lot of business owners, and they all did well over the last 12 months because of during COVID. A lot of them really reduced their costs. A lot of them, got out of their leases. They reduced it, but a number of them that I know said, "I had the best year I ever had."
Yep.
So when you say in your title of your book, even in this economy, right? What do you think are some of the common denominators are the businesses that did very well during COVID?
Well, at the risk of beating the same bell, I think the reality is if you look back at those businesses that did well, there are some things that happened that were unique to the Great Lockdown in terms of cutting costs that I think were very unique in terms of like everyone being at home, canceling your leases, doing more virtual events and that kind of things. But generally, if you look at the ones that really grew their revenue when they had to change and rethink how to deliver their products or services, or even what their products or services were, it comes back to, did you have clarity on who your real people are that you're serving and how their life changed? Not just how your life changed as a business owner, but your real people that you're serving, how did their life change? And the businesses that did really well are the businesses that really catered to that. And then, so I think that's one thing. I think the reality is there's also a big economic shift that's been going on for a little while that kind of like was like it, in some ways the Great Lockdown didn't cause this, but it sped it up, it expedited it, which is the end of the age of information and the beginning of the age of insight. And so there are a lot of businesses that did well just because they were primed for the shift, whether or not they realized it was happening. And so if I could, I'd love to unpack a little bit kind of what that shift is from the age of information to the age of insight. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Sure.
So the age of information is what we've lived through, for the better part of 40 years. It's really the dawn of computers and, digital printing technology and the internet meant that something we take for granted these days, which is the idea that if you want to know the answer to something, pretty much anything, it's out there. You have access to all of the information in the world. Now, that was pretty exciting and cool for the early days of the internet and interconnection between worlds and between peoples, because all of a sudden you saw ideas, just people combining information in really interesting ways and innovation happening at a rapid pace. And that was really the dawn of the age of information in the late 80s and then all through the 90s. Well, then what you found is that today, most of us spend 99% of our energy ignoring information. The average individual gets up to 10,000 marketing messages a day, right? Between literally the title of my book, or, that social media ad you just scrolled past, or, an ad on this podcast, or any of those things, up to 10,000 messages a day that you're ignoring. And so the age of information has been kind of shifting in the background of people realizing that it's not just enough to have access to all the information in the world. That's not enough. it's not enough. And what we really need is insight. And so this is a shift that had already started, but then with COVID-19, the great lockdown, it was expedited, was to what the World Economic Forum calls the age of insight, which is this age that's characterized by people looking for answers to trusted experts who can interpret information and give them just the one or two things, the insight that they need. So, for example, for a lot of people, Dr. Fauci was a curator of information for the last year and a half on behalf of the CDC. There was a lot of people who weren't going to then go read through, thousands and thousands of pages of medical documents, whether it was Dr. Fauci or someone else. If it was a different medical expert they trusted, that's okay. It doesn't have to be just one expert. The idea was people were looking for, who's that one person I trust? Maybe it's your local doctor, right? I mean, I know I called my local doctor, who's also a friend of mine. And I was like, okay, Dr. Hutton, what's this pandemic thing? What does this mean? I'm turning off the news. What do you say? Because you're the trusted expert. And that you find this going on in every industry. So people are looking for, I want to learn how to, run Facebook ads, for example. I'm going to look for that one person who has an online course on how to run Facebook ads. I want to learn how to, start a garden in my backyard that's actually going to feed my family. Well, there are a lot of people that make a full-time living teaching that. I mean, one of the most successful online courses on Teachable, which is one of those course platforms, one of the most successful online courses on there is specifically about how to address iron deficiency in goats. Right? Mm-hmm. Because it's insight. Because if you have a goat and you have an iron deficiency, you need to go to the one person who has that insight for you, right? And so I think that's a burgeoning market where there's so many areas right now where we don't have a clear leader or don't have a clear expert, right? Where people are looking around for answers, and they need entrepreneurs, they need leaders to step up to the plate and give them the insight that they're looking for.
And is that what you're trying to carve out for yourself?
I mean, yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I think for me, so you mentioned in my intro that I'm on a mission to eradicate generational poverty. And I come from generational poverty of just, family member after family member who was stuck in the cycle of really bad financial decisions. I mean, that's really what it was. And there's so many people who are stuck in this cycle and they get kind of stuck there. And some people end up going, kind of in a really dark cycle then of drugs and alcohol and crime. And thankfully that's not my story, but I was the first generation college student, was supposed to go out and change the future, of my family trajectory, to say, like, go out and get this piece of paper that's going to magically change our family tree. And I did that. I got a couple pieces of paper from a couple, universities, or I guess from the same university. I got a couple pieces of paper that say that I know some things, and it didn't really dramatically change my life. And that's kind of when I went back and looked at the patterns of how people change their trajectory of their family story, and really eradicate that generational poverty. And 9 times out of 10, it's entrepreneurship. It's someone stepping up to the plate and saying, you know what, I actually don't need credentials to become an entrepreneur. I just need to cultivate my empathy advantage, where I can care about other people and see their needs and meet their needs. And I need to, build a business that fuels my life. And so that's my passion, is to say, yeah, I want to help people do that. Yes. So I am setting myself up as one of those, curators in the age of insight, to say, look, I cited 116 references in this one book. And I interviewed, 24 of the best and brightest minds in business today that I know of, to include their insights in this book. But I'm just giving you the insight, right? I've curated that and I've distilled that down for you.
Yeah, I had a great mentor for over 20 years, and he would always point this thing out with it. I remember I'd meet with him every quarter and for lunch, and he ended up pulling out a notebook, piece of paper, and then showing something to me on a graph that he wanted me to learn. And then he would show me, that every 10 years there is always a major recession. Mm-hmm. And he would just it would be so like, almost like clockwork every 10 years. And I think one of the mistakes that a lot of business people make is they think they refer to the last year as, due to COVID, right. But it really wasn't COVID. It was a recession.
Yeah.
And I think, the key ingredient is on how businesses thrive, how they become profitable, is that you have to do good during the good times, but you also have to do good at least at least survive the bad times, because the honest truth is, if you're going to be in business long enough, you're going to go through a recession. I've been through 3 recessions, and I'll tell you, it really knocks you for a loop every single time you go in this. This past one we did well in. The one in 2008, I had a different company then.
Yeah.
We got really rocked.
Yeah.
And then the one before that in 2001, we did well in. But so, I think that, but does that kind of cover in your book the ability to survive recessions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so the subtitle is a little bit tongue in cheek because I say, build a profitable business in any economy, including this one, which, by the way, if you're looking at that on the shelf today, you're thinking the COVID-19 recession.
Right,
yeah, but if you're looking at that on the shelf in 5 years or 10 years, you're like, including this one, it's a little bit tongue in cheek because the reality is, with the framework that I teach, the playbook that I teach from, is to build a thriving business based on principles that will serve you in every economy. Now, that doesn't mean you get to write your 1-page business plan, hang it up on the wall and then never change it, right? But it does mean that once you get clear on the fact that as an entrepreneur, you're a problem solver. Your job is to solve problems. Well, in a recession, do you think your customers have more problems or less problems, right? And so then all of a sudden, it's like once you recognize that they have more problems typically during a recession, then you realize, well, that means business could be very good because your job is to solve problems. That's what you do. But the entrepreneurs that failed their business failed rather last year, generally, this is an oversimplification, but I'm going to say it anyways. Generally, can fit into one of 2 categories. Either they were already too overextended in terms of cash flow requirements to be able to adapt to the immediate sudden change in the economy, and so they just didn't have breathing room, right? They just died pretty quickly, or they didn't adapt their business strategy to the new problems their customers had. Yeah.
And there could be a third one, although I think it might fit into the first one you mentioned, and that is, you're in an industry that just got devastated.
Mm-hmm.
If you're this is the most obvious answer, but if you owned a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
right, and you were, well prepared for a recession, and you saved cash. I mean, if you could do that, there's times when it isn't exactly your fault. Although,
sure,
it's hard for, I think, any business owner to, I think most people we're not people who like pass blame. I think you take ownership of the situation often.
Yeah. Well, if I could speak to that restaurant example, that's a great example. I think that, okay, so in every industry or in every economic crisis, there's typically a right side and a wrong side of the crisis, right? I mean, and for example, 2008, if you were in the financial industry, you were on the wrong side of the crisis. In this industry, if you were in hand sanitizer, you were on the right side of the crisis, actually. But if you're a restaurant, you are on the wrong side of the crisis. Now, that doesn't mean a death sentence. That means that it's a very challenging uphill battle to adapt your business.
Agreed.
But I mean, my budget, my personal budget didn't change when the lockdown went into effect. But all of a sudden, I was home with my kids and my wife, and that we weren't getting out much. And man, there were so many opportunities that restaurants missed in terms of reaching out to us and recognize that, okay, are you in the restaurant business or are you in the feeding families business, right? Who are your real people? What is their real problem and what is your solution? Now, the solution needs to change, right? If we're actively being told by the world governments, don't leave your house, and your business model is based on us leaving our house, okay, well, maybe you need to rethink that, right? But so just a couple doors down from me is Puckett's. They're a barbecue, they're a barbecue small chain kind of in Tennessee. They've got, I think, 7 locations or something like that. And one of the things
a barbecue place in Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So but one of the things they did, for example, was they had an event, which they had a truck that they would just use for some catering events sometimes, but instead they converted it into a mobile food unit, and they went into some of the more dense neighborhoods in Nashville, and they sold family meals. So you would get an aluminum, pan full of enough food to feed a family of 4. And and they would charge a premium for that. They would deliver to you a hot meal. Are you kidding me? A week into the pandemic, I was tired of cooking. I would
Wow.
have paid so much money for that. You know what I mean? It's like, so there's so many restaurants that said, oh man, you know what? I'm in the dining room business, so I guess I'm out. But you're not, because the chairs and the tables don't care about you. The people do, right? And they still needed people in the midst of the pandemic, still need food, still need comfort, still want that familiar meal while they're grieving the loss of familiarity in every other area of their life. So yes, if you were a restaurant owner, it was incredibly challenging, still is an incredibly challenging time to operate your business, but that doesn't mean a death sentence, because once you get clear on who your target customer is, you can still you can still adjust your business strategy.
Yeah, there's two things that I would say my business partner and I, did really well. So between him and I, we've built 8 companies over the last 25 years,
That's
right?
awesome.
So in 2012, we started Financing Solutions, and about 3 or 4 years into it, we had both had experienced what it was like to go through past recessions.
Yes.
So we were like, okay, at some point, and we were kind of looking forward to it. At some point, Financing Solutions would come into a situation where there would be a recession in the market. And we actually were looking forward to that because a lot of our competitors in the space, we knew that their funding would dry up because they weren't really profitable. So we were doing well. We made a change from long-term financing to lines of credit, but at the same time, we started had a lot of conversations about what would we do during a recession. And we had those conversations over and over and over again. And we said, well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we cut our costs really quickly, because we'd both been through recessions. We knew that most of the time we waited too long. And so that was the lesson that we knew, number one. Number two is we started another business. We started looking for another business that was counter-cyclical to the financing business.
That's great.
So we started another company that was counter-cyclical. And so as soon as the coronavirus hit, or the recession hit, within 3 months, we had cut our expenses huge at Financing Solutions. And then and then of course we had the other business, which was booming because it wasn't really a business that got affected with recessions or not. So I mean, now why did we do this stuff? Because we had made mistakes before in the past.
Yeah.
It was experience. We were smart. We had just gotten, we learned.
Yeah.
And so, that restaurant that you're talking about with the guy who had the truck, well, he might have been lucky and had the truck and stuff like that. He also could have been someone who's been through recessions before. I don't know,
Well, I could say, I did a similar thing in the fact that, while I'm talking to you right now, I'm in one of my businesses, which is a co-working space company. And we actually opened our first location, a small co-working space in Columbia, Tennessee, 58 days before the lockdown closed us for 48 days.
Wow.
Not a great start to that business, right? That's not, we had spent 3 months of doing build out and, build up, and we had all this momentum. We had a big launch party. We had a lot of momentum and a good start to that business. And then boom, now all of a sudden everyone's at home. And then even when the lockdown lifted, we were like, I remember my wife and I started the business together. So we were talking, just the two of us, just saying like, well, right now, the entire, message that all the world governments are telling everyone is stay home. So us to then fight uphill and say, no, leave your home, come work here, would just really be wasting a lot of energy. And so we said, look, we're still here as a co-working space. We opened after the pandemic, or after the lockdown rather. And we, had extra spacing, there was extra social distancing measures. We moved half the furniture really in the space, and then had, more sanitation and all that kind of good stuff that everybody did. But then we also said, okay, this is here, but we're going to downshift with that business. And kind of like you, we said, okay, but let's upshift in some of this other stuff. So I have a software company. We launched a new product for content creators because that was a whole big thing going on. I wrote this book, but I also took on a few different, which, for a season during last year, I took on multiple different options where I was a fractional chief marketing officer for different companies who were trying to rethink all of their marketing strategy. And they weren't at a point in their business where they could afford a full-time chief marketing officer, but they really needed some help. And so I was able to then really identify these are some real entrepreneurs who need my help, serve them, help them. That replaced all of our income. And then, and that's what we did too, is that it doesn't, thriving in any economy doesn't mean that you have the same products you want to, necessarily, because with the co-working space, it's doing really well now, right? But it's been a while, and so we had to be able to weather that storm for the business to do really well. So then when people felt more comfortable getting out of their homes, once people also were tired of working at home, then all of a sudden we started getting more calls and tours and people signing up and joining the space. And now we're looking at opening multiple locations in the near future. So all that to say, that's part of entrepreneurship, is solving problems, right? That's the core of it, right? So it's very frustrating when you're trying to solve one problem and then someone moves the target. It's very frustrating. I don't want to gloss that over, but it doesn't mean you're helpless.
Yeah, I like the way you articulated that, to be honest with you. That was really good. So we have a couple of minutes left. I'm going to, I know we might repeat ourselves here, but I want you to give our listeners the 3 top things that you think your book says to have a thriving business.
Yeah, of course. Well, I will say that, the first thing is really just that whole, just the commitment to building a profitable business that can survive in any economy. Because honestly, in good times, it's not easy, but it's simple to make money, right? Sometimes you can just find an opportunity and find a hustle or do a flip and make money. But that's not what I'm after. I'm after helping entrepreneurs to build thriving businesses that will last and that will make the world a better place, because truly the world we have, many of every amenity around us, you've got 2 sources of goods in the world. You've got creation, right? I mean, nature, entrepreneurs can claim no credit for that. And then you've got improvements to our life in terms of the technology all around us that comes from entrepreneurs. And so I'm a big believer in entrepreneurship growth. So the first thing is just the framework that's going to allow you to build a business that thrives in any economy, which means you'll do well in bad economy or in economic crises, but it means you'll do really well in the good times too. So that's
and just to add to that, something that I said earlier, I think when things are going really well, you just think that it's always going to be that way.
Yeah.
I think the exercise that my business partner and I did, where we said the economy is going to change. What happens? How will we change? What will we do? I think that exercise is helpful for people to look at. Yeah. Number 2, what would you say the second takeaway is?
The number 2 is really just the practical exercises to walk you through this. Because I can teach you all day long about the fact that you should build a thriving business. And I can even give you a fill-in-the-blank playbook. But then the question is, okay, but then how do you put that into practice? And so, actually, I would say this is in the book, but some people prefer video. So if you go to surviveandthrivebook.com, you can order the book and get a companion course that goes with it that walks you through exercises to help you find your real people. Find out what is the real problem that you're going to solve. What's the real solution you're going to offer. Walk you through the growth models in your business. And so I think that's really key. And if I could say the third thing, and this is in that companion course, but it's really the third thing that I think, makes the biggest difference in a business, especially for an existing business. And you're thinking, okay, but what's like the one thing I can do that's going to dramatically improve my results so I can get more sales from more customers more often? It's your core products selection. So I teach a framework that includes having a gateway product, a continuity product, and a flagship product. That's in the book. It's also in the course. I think once you see how those all fit together, you'll see how pretty quickly you can double or triple or 10x your revenue, depending upon what you already have in place, just by implementing those 3 products in your business.
You know what I like, John? I like the scorecard that you talked about.
Oh, good.
I would like to go through that scorecard and sit there and say, I don't know if you do A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
So you I like that.
Well, good. Please. No, I like, and some people are really competitive and they're more about scoring against other people. I'm definitely an achiever in the sense that I want to score against myself, right? So that's a free assessment and it's in the book, but I would love you to buy the book, but even if you don't, you can go to yourthrivescore.com and just take that free assessment, but it'll give you a numerical score of here's how your business is right now. Here's your Thrive score. Now, the goal then is that you don't just take that and say, oh, dang it, I didn't get 100. The goal is that you then go back and say, okay, well, I can make these 2 tweaks in my business and come back and take the assessment again and see my score improve. And by the way, when your score improves, it should improve your bottom line as well. So, it's not just a vanity metric. It's supposed to really help you guide your focus.
Yeah, I think what I would do is then prioritize because, let's face it, small businesses are limited on their resources. And so I would then prioritize and say, okay, this is the one that's going to contribute the most to my profitability.
Exactly.
So I'm going to work on this one first and then this one second and so on and so forth. Honestly, you're probably not going to get to 3, 4, 5, and 6. You probably get to 1 and 2. And then as the business grows and you can hire more and more and more people, then you could start working on the other stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even have a score of a perfect 100 when I take the assessment. So like, that's not the goal, right? The goal is just to help you figure out where are you at and what's next,
Just to get better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I like it. So good. All right. Well, that's great, John. That's all the time we have for today. And I would like to thank so very much John Meese for coming on today's podcast. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. The Entrepreneur MBA has become extremely popular. We get thousands of listeners all the time. I'm really excited about it. And if you are looking for a line of credit for your business, please give us a call at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at fscreditline.com. John, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, of course, you can go to surviveandthrive.com and, of course, get the book. But actually, I'm just going to call an audible right now and give you my number. So if you text the word Thrive to 615-392-1289, I'll send you a copy of the playbook that I talked about. This is the fill in the blank, worksheet that's really meant to be like a 1-page business plan to help you create a thriving business. And that's really, that's sort of like the Reader's Digest version, I guess, or the cheat sheet version of my book. But yeah, so just text that number. So text the word Thrive to 615-392-1289. And can't wait to hear from you.
Also, you could probably, if you need to talk to John too, that if you'd like to talk to John, you could probably text him there too as well.
Yes, exactly. That's right. You can text more than the word Thrive, but that'll let me know that you want the playbook.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and for our listeners who are interested in getting really new business ideas or new thoughts, I tweet daily at S Halasnik, SHALASNIK. For all of our listeners out there, things are looking up. Things are much better. I think everyone's happy that the summer's here and that we can kind of get back to a new normal, if using that word that everybody uses. But just
I've been calling it the new extraordinary, but you can call it whatever you like. That's fine.
There you go.
Yeah,
I like that. But just remember, these past year is a lesson that will help you in your future business for the rest of your life, probably in your life too. So take it for a great learning experience. So everybody have a fantastic day. Enjoy yourselves. Get out there. Enjoy life. And we'll see you soon.